Hello, everybody. We are in week 2 of Web 1, and we're going to be just backtracking a little bit, looking at some of the topics we didn't finish up last week. And from what I was looking at here in this topic list, I think that basically where we left off is we got to the FTP accounts. We did take a file and upload it, but then we didn't really talk about a lot of these other things. So I'm going to talk about those as we're working, and I do intend on crossing off every item on that list so that we have it fully covered. I know that we have a lot of different levels of expertise in the room. We have people that work on various platforms, meaning Mac OS, Linux, Windows, and I know a lot of you are using various forms of Windows. In fact, let's take a really quick informal poll. How many are using Windows 10 as their primary OS? Well, you guys are wonderful. That's most of the room, and you should be at this point. There's no reason not to. How many of you are stuck with 7 or 8? 8 or 7? 7. All right. 7 is still like the big enterprise operating system. Gateway has not officially moved to 10 yet. We were supposed to do it this year, but we haven't done it quite yet. If you're reluctant to upgrade, I would try to dispel all the rumors of those reluctancies. Just make sure your hardware works with Windows 10. It's definitely worth the upgrade. If you've gone past your free period for upgrading, which I think is already lapsed, you can get it for free from DreamSpark. You guys all have DreamSpark through your student accounts? Yeah, and actually you don't even need to do that. I can show you a trick. All you need is the product key, believe it or not. And then you can download it. You don't have to burn a disk to install it. So James, when when we get to actually get a break or something, I can just do a real quick, show you how to download it and install it. All right, folks. So the first thing that we're going to review here is this simple little assignment. And like I said, I know that most of us here in the classroom were successful last week. And I record this also for the sake of my onliners, and I think most of them were successful from what I saw in the gradebook, but there's still questions that linger. All right, so just to review, what is FTP? It stands for File Transfer Protocol. It's one of the many protocols that runs over the web. When we create web pages, you'll always see this little HTTP up here. That's a different protocol, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Know that one. It's going to be on your exams, guaranteed. Better walk out of this class knowing that. All right. But FTP is another one of these protocols, and its design is to do exactly what its name is, and that is to move files around, to upload and download files. So as web developers, when we create a web page, we will work locally on our machines, and then when our work is done, we upload our files to a web server of some sort, and then it can be accessed over the internet. Okay, it's really as simple as that. Now, FTP can be achieved like a number of different ways. The best way to perform FTP is to use an FTP Client program. The one that I recommend is FileZilla. And just, I know we did this last week, but repetition is a good thing. So this is the name of the program. Just go right here, download the client, not the server. And then when you have the product installed and you execute it, it should look like this. Oh, it usually prompts me to upgrade. And right now I'm ignoring it. Now is not the time to do an upgrade. And then when you are to connect to Gateway's web server for the web department, we have a server called kronos.gtc.edu. We just call it Kronos. So if you ever hear anybody throwing that around, that's what it means. And of course, you'll have whatever your username is and your password, and you type those in, you hit the quick connect button, and then you have a connection to the server, live connection, and now you can move files between your local machine and the remote server with very simple actions. In fact, if you haven't discovered this yet, you can just do something like grab a file, drag and drop it, and it's up there. Now, you have to be careful where you put your stuff. So let's start with that caveat. For the work that we do in this class, the place where you want to upload files is this public HTML folder. When you hit the server and you log in, you will land in what we call the root folder of your account. So every user has a root folder. However, if you put stuff directly into that root folder, you cannot see them on the web. It has to go into the public HTML folder. So if I go into that folder, you're going to see all the files that I have available in my account, and all of them are accessible from the web. Now, what you guys have done thus far is you created a really simple little file. This is probably the one right here. And we didn't even write any HTML in there. We just threw in some text. uploaded it to the server, and then opened it up in the browser. That was the extent of your assignment. Now, when something is located in that public HTML folder, you can access it by going to your browser, and you can see in the unit folder, I did highlight that. And notice how it says the server name, and then right after that / there's a tilde. You guys know where to find that on the keyboard? It's the shift of the reverse apostrophe key, almost always above the tab key. I said that so many times that kind of ingrained in my memory there. All right, and then here where it says your username, do not type your username, type your username, right? Get it? So you should have that in your gradebook. If you haven't done this assignment yet, remember, go into your gradebook like as if you would look for your grades, and you will see an entry for your Cronus username and password. Passwords are case sensitive. Actually, usernames are too, but all our usernames tend to be lowercase. They tend to be first initial, last name, but there are some circumstances where we'll use like full name, first name, and last name. You can, if you know how to go to the command line, and I know that you do. Yeah, I do allow you to change it, but that's the caveat. If you can figure out how to do an SSH and get to a prompt and know what to type, feel free. You know, that's really up to you. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to come to my browser, and I'm going to type in Cronus, that / the tilde, my user account, and a /. And because I named my file index.html, and this is critical, it has to be all lowercase, and it has to be exactly named that. So when I come to my browser and I just press enter, that page will come up. Now, it's not a very exciting page, but that's what comes up. And I want you to notice that at the end of the URL, there is no file name listed. That's because the file is called index.html. I can also type the file name, and it'll just take me to the same spot. So when I start working with pages that are not named index.html, then I do need to have the name of the file appended to the URL in order to be able to access it. Index is one of those automatics. And if you think about the logic as to why, do you go to coca-cola.com / index.html? No, you just go to coca-cola.com, right? You don't want to have to remember the name of the file. So that's the why. All right, so that's just a quick review of the FTP process. It's not very difficult. You'll get used to it. It might be a little intimidating at first because all of a sudden you're controlling files on a remote machine. But it's really not that big a deal. It's not that much different than just moving files around on your own system. The thing that is different, though, is that we are moving from a Windows file system over to a Linux file system. Two different operating systems. One of the issues that you have with that is Windows hypothetically is case sensitive with file names, but the truth is in practice, it's not. You can actually misspell file names, and if you're working locally on your machine, it will still render them. Same thing on the Mac OS. So our consumer operating systems somewhat dumb down their interface for the benefit of the user, right? Because it makes it easier to do stuff. However, all of a sudden you're going to take that file that was slightly misnamed, like capital I for index, you put it on the Linux server and it doesn't work. Because Linux is highly case sensitive. You must absolutely have the right case, otherwise it won't work. So memorize those things. Those are pretty important skills to know. All right, since we're talking about file systems, I'm just going to jump over to a folder that I have open here. This is stuff that we were doing in our Web 2 class out in Burlington today. And I want to talk a little bit about file management. When you're in an IT program, file management, I can't tell you how critical it is, and I see people struggle with it. File management is to IT what learning how to read and write is to regular scholastics. It's like if you don't know how to compose a sentence, you're going to have a hard time getting a job. If you can't locate a file in a file system, you're going to have a hard time working in IT. So it becomes really critical that you get very organized with your files. You can, frankly, you can manage things any way you want. That's on you. I've already given you the strong advice not to use flash drives for permanent storage, and very strongly encourage you to use some sort of cloud storage for any sort of active work that you're doing. I'm not saying for long term, but if you're working on homework, things happen. Laptops get stolen. You might drive into the lake and No, you're not going to do that. But who knows? Anything can happen, and you don't want to lose the one spot where your files are located. You put it in the cloud. You use the Google Drive attached to your email. I know this stuff is repetition. I see the look on your face. You already said this. But it's that important because every week we find more and more flash drives left here. Usually there's a couple sitting on the table. Don't be one of those people. All right, so here I am in my folder. And typically what I do when I store my files is I store everything in my Google Drive folder that's related to school. So I actually have a folder on the machine that syncs up with Google Drive. I run the Google Drive software in the system tray, and it automatically does a sync. You don't have to do that, but if you're working on your own equipment, I highly recommend it because it takes a lot of guesswork out of it. You just save to your local drive like you normally do, and it throws up on the cloud, and you're great. All right. Now, in terms of file management, find a spot on your hard drive. The typical spot where Microsoft tries to point us is to our documents folder, right? And that's fine if that's what you want to do. Lately, it's become my habit that I don't put anything in that folder anymore. And it's for a number of different reasons. One of them is everybody knows where to look for your stuff then, right? A lot of the ransomware software that's out there, that's the folder they attack. So you put stuff in there, they take control of your machine, encrypt all your files. Which folders are they encrypting? Right? Your documents folder, typically. All right, but regardless of the spot that you choose, create yourself a folder. If you are using Windows 8 or Windows 10, your File Explorer window will look similar to this. The one thing that I strongly recommend that you do as a Windows user is there's this little drop-down arrow right here. I don't know if you guys can see it. In fact, most people do not know it's there. You hit that little button and you get the ribbon bar. My suggestion is that you turn it on and leave it on because it has a lot of stuff on it, and that's really helpful. If you are in Windows 7, you will still have the traditional menu structure, which is fine. You can do all the same things, in essence, from that interface. All right, so once you're actually in a root location where you want to put your stuff, I would suggest you create a folder. You might want to call it like Gateway or GTC, like I just did. So I clicked New Folder and named it. Now I'm going into that folder, and then I would suggest that you make one for, you might go like spring semester, fall semester, that's up to you, or you might just say Web 1, something like that. And then we are going to have units in this class, right? So we're going to have like 8 or 10 units of instruction. I recommend that you go through, and then for each unit of instruction, you create a folder for that unit. And then you'll find that you'll have a regular assignment I give you, probably a couple of case studies, and you should create a folder for each one of those things. That's my recommendation. Now, of course, that's up to you. You want to throw stuff wherever, go for it. I'm very guilty of I throw everything on the desktop and sort it out later. It depends on what I'm doing, frankly, but that's a very common action for me. Now, when you are inside your folders, and you can see here, I'm going to create another new folder, and I'm going to call this Unit 2, because that's what we're going to be working on tonight. Notice also, when I named it, there's no spaces, and I chose to go all lowercase. You know why? Because I'm going to move it up to the server just that way. And the server, even though it can handle spaces, it's highly not recommended to use spaces in any file names or folder names on a Linux file system, especially when you're publishing to the web. Typically, that's not a problem these days, but it can cause issues depending on the system you're connected to, and you can never really determine that. So the safe way to play it is no spaces and file or folder names. They are case sensitive. So come up with a convention that works for you. Now, once I go into this folder, one of the things we're going to do tonight is we're going to create files and work with them. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually come up here. I'm going to right-click. You guys can do the same. Mac people can do this too, because we always get the cynical Mac people that are probably going, what about Macs? I'm not forgetting you. I'm a Mac person too. So I'm going to right-click, come down to Text Document, and I'm doing this with intention. So it seems like the wrong thing to do, but it's totally the right thing to do. And you can see that on my machine, it brings up the interface here. I can type in a file name. All right. So I'll just call it, whatever. That's one of my favorites, if you were wondering. All right. So I call it whatever. And notice it's got a file extension of txt. Right? Guess what? The default for Windows and for the Mac OS is to not display file extensions. So typically, this is what you're going to see. You'll see the name of a file. It'll tell you it's a text file. And you're going to see an icon that, for whatever program it's associated with, whether it's Notepad or some coding program. Mine is associated with Notepad++. Well, that's one of the recommended editors I'm going to point you to, and we're going to talk about those in a little bit. But when we have a file that's named like this, we have this tendency that we want to turn it into an HTML file. So we'll right-click it, and we'll rename it, and at the end of it, I'm going to put .html, right? Those of you that know what I'm doing, right? There it is. It says whatever.html. That's a web page. But the truth is, because the file extensions are hidden, you're not really seeing the file extension. So as IT people, very, very strongly encourage that you always turn on your file extensions. Always. Let the regular people turn them off. You're an IT person. It should be turned on. And it should be turned on for every folder you visit. You need to know what's there. Okay? So this is a problem I'll see with people who are kind of like brand new to working in IT and are just learning the skills for the first time. I know there's plenty of you that understand what I'm doing, and I can see just from the looks on your faces, you're like, yeah, I know this already, and that's fine. But I'm just repeating it because you might have a little gap in your knowledge somewhere, and I'm just trying to fill all the holes. Because the more of a solid foundation you get here, the more you can zoom when we get to the higher level stuff. You won't be encumbered by all this trivial stuff. So I'm going to come back in here now and rename this. And actually, why don't I make it index.html while we're at it? All right, I'm getting prompted. Do I want to change the file extension? Yes, I do, because I know what I'm doing. Right? And you can see right away when it's got the proper file extension, it's going to draft up an icon that attaches to whatever the default program is to open an HTML file. In this case, it's the Chrome web browser on my machine. All right. So I'm going to just jump back over to the core shell here real quickly, and I think we covered a lot of the points here that we didn't last time. All right, we got files. All right, we got all that stuff. Now we're going to add a couple more things. The one thing that I do want to talk about, and it's on our agenda list for Unit 2 as well, is some of the tools that you can use to create web pages. In the most primitive form, you can use a program that's built into Windows. It's on every version of Windows. It's called Notepad. Notepad is a very basic text editor, very, very basic. But you know what? For a quick little edit, it's fine. I wouldn't recommend doing like real development work with it because it lacks a lot of the features that a proper development tool does. But in a pinch, it works. What I do recommend very heavily is this program called Notepad++. Some of you might already be familiar with it, but if you just do a really quick search for Notepad++, it's one of these tools that's open source, it's absolutely free, and yet it's super powerful. And for me, when it comes to like just, I need to grab a text editor, sometimes if like somebody's like telling me something, I might take notes, I just hit Notepad++ and start typing. And and even though it looks like a pretty primitive program, and I do have it up here, it doesn't look very fancy, but I'll tell you what, under the hood, it can do a lot more than most programs can do. It can deal with, I don't know how many different languages, it color codes them, you can split screen stuff, so you can look at two different versions of code, you can zoom and zoom out, zoom in. You can see this is some stuff that we were doing in class today, so when you guys get a little more advanced with your skills, you can make a little game like we were making in class. So it's a very cool program. The other thing I really like about it a lot is you notice how like this little icon here is red? That means I didn't save it. Oops, right? No, actually if I go back, it's not saved, but it's still in there. I love that feature. The other thing that you can do is if you create a web page in this program, it has a run menu, and it'll recognize that it's an HTML file, and you can just come up here, click run, choose your browser, and it goes. So that's one cool tool. The other thing that it has built into it, it also has an Ftp client built into it, believe it or not, and there's all sorts of plugins you can get. So if I were to recommend one basic tool that's free for you to use, this is probably at the top of my list. Yes? Sure. Yeah, the question. Oh, okay. Well, if that's the case, then go with 32. It depends on how many plugins you choose to add. Generally speaking, if you're on a 64-bit operating system, which everybody should be at this point, unless you're running like Windows XP, There's people that still run it. 64 bits recommended just simply because the performance hypothetically is better. But 32 or 64, if it works, it works. It's a text editor. It's not a video editing program. So either one. Now, in terms of some other tools that are out there, here's one that we discovered. I know a lot of you use like Visual Studio for coding, right? You guys like intro to programming class, maybe some other classes you've used Visual Studio. Visual Studio is an excellent HTML editor these days. I don't usually push people to use that product first because the environment can be a little bit too robust for some people, and it's easy to get lost when you're overwhelmed by the interface. But if you actually do a little bit of searching here, I'm taking us to Microsoft's download page for Visual Studio. Visual Studio 2015 is available completely free. Previous versions, the 2013, 2012, 2010, etc., all those versions you had to pay for them. As students here in a program like this, you get it free anyhow from DreamSpark. But now the community version, the 2015 version, is available free for everybody. And that's pretty cool because it's a very powerful tool. I think it's actually a pretty brilliant move on Microsoft's part. But the other one here that I really want to point your attention to is this one on the far end called Visual Studio Code. In Visual Studio Code, you can see is a free download. And what I think is fascinating is look down here. It runs on the Mac OS and the Linux OS too. How cool is that? Now, I do have it installed here, I think. I do. And it's sort of in the category that Visual or Notepad++ is. It's kind of in that same category. It's really designed to be a straight-up text editor, and it's got a lot of neat tools built in. I think it's taking a while to load up here. I'm probably pushing my machine a little hard right now. About 20 windows open. But it's got a pretty simplistic little interface, and it natively supports many, many different languages. It's got little sidebars here that you can click on, and you can see your files and your folders. It's even got little debugging tools you can add, and a lot of the students I've pointed to this product really like it. I haven't really latched onto it much yet, but this is a good tool. It's free. It runs on a Mac. Sometimes Mac people have hard times finding tools that are equivalent to the PC tools, so that's one I recommend. Another one that people will look at is the one called Atom, and I probably have to type text editor there. And once again, I have this installed. Not a big user of it. I have tinkered with it a bit. It's very similar to Visual Studio Code. It's got a very sleek looking modern interface. Handles a lot of different languages. It has sidebar, folder structures. So that's kind of a cool product. You want to try it. A couple more. Here's one that some of our other web teachers are using. I haven't used this one yet, so I can't vouch for it, but I see a lot of my students using it. It's called WebStorm. And notice it also does JavaScript, and it's considered an IDE. They also have versions that do like PHP and some other languages. Once again, a free tool. Can't vouch for it though. One that I can very strongly vouch for is a tool called Brackets. Brackets is an interesting product. It is completely free, and it's an open source version of an Adobe product that's not quite the same name. I think the full-blown version was Adobe Code Inspect or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But this is an excellent product. Just like the two previous ones that I showed you, or three previous ones that I showed you, it is an IDE, meaning it can support multiple languages. It has integrated file navigation, all sorts of extensions and plugins you can throw in. It offers some features that are similar to more robust IDEs, including like when you're like typing a color code, it pops up a color box so you can pick your color instead of knowing the code. And it has a really cool little button here on the side, that lightning bolt, where you hit it, and whatever page you're working on, it'll throw it up in your browser. And then not only throw it up in your browser, but then as you're making changes in the editor, the browser updates live. That's kind of fun. So that's kind of a neat product. A lot of students that get into this product don't leave it. They really like it quite a bit. And once again, it is designed by Adobe, but it's open source, so it's completely free. All right. Now, I always get the question, well, what do you use, right? And like I told you already, Notepad++ is kind of one of my de facto tools, especially when it's simple edits that I'm working with. But if I'm really doing heavy development work, I'm either going to Visual Studio, and that's not my first choice. This is my first choice, Dreamweaver. And this is an Adobe product that is not free. No, it's not. However, as students, you have the capability of getting a Creative Cloud subscription for the price of about $10 a month. Professionals who get it, it's $50 a month, just to give you an idea of how much of a savings. I'm buying it too, and I think my rate is like 25 or 29, but I use it all the time. And you don't just get a web editor. In fact, you get Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere, After Effects. There's like 20 or 30. You get like everything Adobe has. It's like, here you go. I mean, it's so powerful, it's crazy. Now, in terms of, what professionals use, it will depend. It depends on the kind of development work you're doing. People that tend to do a lot of open source work and tend to do more front-end work, meaning the stuff that people see on the website, they opt for Dreamweaver. It's got a long history. It's got a very rich set of tools, especially for controlling the appearance of a page. It also has very good debugging tools. You know who that was? My in-laws. Reject call with message. I'm in class right now. Okay, I'm sorry, sideline. But it's a very cool tool, and very often when I'm doing stuff in class, this is one of the tools I'll use. You don't have to buy it to do the work. Any text editor will work, but what's nice about the product is if you go out into the workplace and work professionally, and you tend to do more front-end work, chances are this is the product you're going to use. Yes, Jim? Through Adobe. If you're interested, go to creative.adobe.com. That's kind of like the homepage, but the internet is slow right now. You guys noticing that? Or is it my laptop? I'm not quite sure. All right, so it's taking us to the Adobe homepage very slowly. You guys need to stop streaming those videos. I think it's doing that. All right, so you can go right to this page, but I can share with you some information from the school, because if you buy it through the school, they have a special setup. If you get it here, you're probably going to pay either $20 or $30 a month.
I think even educational is like $20 a month or something.
Yeah. For my money, it's worth it because you get a lot of products. If you don't have the money to spend, there's no obligation, and I'm not like on their payroll or anything, but I'm just telling you when it comes to being out in the field, it's not just the fact that you have Dreamweaver, it's the fact that you have Photoshop and Illustrator, and as we progress, I'll have you understand why those are important products to know. There's also like media conversion tools and video tools, and as a web designer, even though it's maybe not necessarily your job to control graphics, very often you'll be handed a graphic, and you want to get it on the page. You don't want to have to send it back to a designer to do a couple of tweaks, and wait for them to do the work. You just get in there, you do it, and go, right? And it also helps to kind of know the lingo a little bit. So if you're interested in that, talk to me when we're on break or after class, and I'll share the information with you. Do this only if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, don't worry about it. There's plenty of good free tools out there too. And I have plenty of people like, oh, that Dreamweaver is cheating. No, it's not cheating. It's a powerful tool. And the truth is when you get to higher levels of development, having a powerful tool increases your productivity, makes you worth more, right? Because you can work faster, do more projects. Okay. All right, so that's my little spiel on tools that you can use to work with. I already recommended an FTP program. That's FileZilla. Any one of those coding tools is fine. At a very primitive level, go with Notepad++ if I'm going to give you a recommendation. All right, but what we're going to do now is I'm going to switch us over to Unit 2, and we're going to basically talk about the topics here that we haven't talked about yet in Unit 2. I am going to pause the video, and we're going to take a real brief break. Just give us a couple of minutes, and then we'll get digging into the material. And I'm realizing as I look at the course shell in Unit 2 that I don't think I shared the PowerPoint. Did I? We'll find out. All right, so we'll be back in just a couple of minutes, and I'll add the PowerPoint.